Do you want to know what arsenic tastes like? Neither did I, until I started mixing it into my mother-in-law's morning coffee every single day for 23 months. Turns out it doesn't taste like anything at all. That's what makes it perfect. No smell, no flavor, completely invisible in food or drinks. Just a small white powder that dissolves into nothing while it slowly destroys someone's organs from the inside out. I learned that from the internet, along with the fact that low-dose arsenic poisoning mimics cancer symptoms almost perfectly. Weight loss, nausea, fatigue, organ failure. Doctors will run tests for cancer and find nothing definitive, but they'll never think to test for arsenic. Why would they? Who poisons people anymore? But I did. For nearly 2 years, I systematically poisoned my mother-in-law, Patricia, and everyone, the doctors, the hospice nurses, my husband, her friends, the entire family believed she died of pancreatic cancer. She didn't. She died because I put poison in her food every morning while she sat at my kitchen table criticizing how I made toast. My name is Claire. I'm 38 years old, I work in marketing, and 2 years ago I committed the perfect murder. Not in some dramatic moment of rage, not with a gun or a knife or anything that leaves evidence. I killed someone slowly, methodically, with the patience of a gardener pulling weeds one at a time until the entire garden is clear. And the thing that haunts me most isn't that I did it, it's that I got away with it. Patricia is buried in Greenwood Cemetery under a headstone that says, "Beloved Mother, taken too soon by cancer." Her death certificate lists metastatic carcinoma as cause of death. The medical examiner signed off without question. My husband David inherited her house, which we sold for $300,000, and I'm the only person alive who knows that Patricia didn't die of cancer. She died because I decided she should. Let me tell you exactly how I did it. Not because I'm proud, but because someone needs to know the truth before I lose my mind completely carrying this alone. And maybe, just maybe, if I say it out loud, if I confess every detail, I'll finally be able to sleep through the night without seeing Patricia's face the morning she was too weak to get out of bed. I met Patricia 8 years ago when David and I started dating. She was 53 then, recently widowed, living alone in a big house in the suburbs. She was one of those women who never quite figured out that her son had grown up and didn't need her managing every aspect of his life anymore. Within a month of us dating, she was already making comments. David was too good for me. Did I really need that second glass of wine? Was I sure my job was stable enough? Maybe I should dress more professionally when meeting his family. Subtle digs wrapped in concern, delivered with a smile that never reached her eyes. David thought she was just being protective, said his mom had been through a lot losing his dad, that she'd warm up to me eventually. So I smiled through the comments, laughed off the suggestions that David could do better, ignored the way she'd rearranged things in our apartment when she visited, like my organizational system wasn't good enough. I was in love with David. I could handle his difficult mother. We got married 3 years ago. Small ceremony, David's idea, because his mom was still grieving and a big wedding would be too much. Patricia wore white to our wedding. When I mentioned that was typically the bride's color, she said she hadn't realized, and wasn't it nice that we matched? During the reception, she made a toast about how she hoped I'd take good care of her son, emphasis on hoped, like she had serious doubts about my ability to do so. The first year of marriage was manageable. David lived 30 minutes away. We saw her for Sunday dinners, holidays, the occasional emergency when she needed something fixed at her house. Annoying, but tolerable. Then came the conversation I'd been dreading. David thought we should invite his mom to move in with us. Just temporarily, he said, just until she got back on her feet emotionally. She was lonely in that big house. She needed family around her. It wouldn't be forever, just maybe a year or 2. I said absolutely not. We'd been married barely a year. I was not ready to live with my mother. David got upset, accused me of being selfish, said his mom had always been there for him, and now when she needed support, I was refusing to help. We had the space, our house had 3 bedrooms, it was the right thing to do. What kind of person was I if I couldn't make this sacrifice? I tried to stand firm, said we needed our space, our privacy, our marriage came first. David said his mother raised him alone after his father died and never once complained. The least we could do was give her a place to stay when she was struggling. He used every guilt trip he could think of. Eventually, I caved. Patricia moved into our guest room temporarily. That was 4 years ago. Living with Patricia was worse than I could have imagined. She criticized everything. My cooking was too bland. Why did I keep the house so cold? Did I really need to go out with friends twice a month? Didn't I think I should be home with my husband? She'd rearrange my kitchen when I was at work, change the thermostat, do David's laundry the right way because I apparently didn't know how to separate whites properly. David thought she was being helpful. When I complained, he said I was being oversensitive. His mom was just trying to contribute to the household. She was from a different generation where women took pride in homemaking. I should appreciate that she cared enough to want things done well. Every complaint I had was dismissed or minimized. After 6 months, I stopped complaining. What was the point? The worst part was how she positioned herself between me and David. She'd wait up for him when he came home from work, have dinner ready before I even got back from my job. They'd be laughing and talking at the dinner table, and I'd walk in feeling like an intruder in my own marriage. She'd make comments about how tired David looked, how hard he worked. Didn't I think he deserved a hot meal when he got home instead of having to wait for me? David would tell her I had a demanding job too, but he'd say it without any real force, like he was just being polite but agreed with her. Intimacy became impossible. Our bedroom was next to hers, and Patricia made it clear she could hear everything through the walls. She'd make uncomfortable jokes at breakfast about young people and their energy if David and I had been together the night before. It got to the point where we barely touched each other. We'd been married less than 2 years and already felt like roommates. I tried to get David to set boundaries, asked him to tell his mother to stop criticizing me, to give us space, to remember this was our house. He'd have gentle conversations with her that changed nothing. She'd apologize, say she didn't mean to overstep, promise to do better. Then within days, she'd be right back to her old behavior, and David would act like the conversation had solved everything, like I was the one being unreasonable for not being satisfied with his mother's empty promises. I started to hate her, not dislike, actual visceral hatred. I'd fantasize about her dying, car accidents, heart attacks, anything that would remove her from my life. I'd daydream about David getting a job transfer across the country and Patricia refusing to come with us. I'd imagine winning the lottery and buying her a luxury condo on the other side of town, anything to get her out of my house. Then, one day, I was researching something for work, marketing strategies for a pest control client, and I came across an article about arsenic, how it used to be called inheritance powder because it was the poison of choice for people who wanted to kill slowly and avoid detection, how Victorian women would poison abusive husbands bit by bit until they died of apparent natural causes, how modern forensics made it harder but not impossible if you were patient and careful. I should have closed that browser tab, should have dismissed it as a dark but irrelevant historical footnote. Instead, I started researching more. What were the symptoms of arsenic poisoning? How much was lethal? How long would it take? Could doctors detect it? What would they look for? I told myself I was just curious, just doing research out of morbid interest. But I wasn't. Even then, some part of me was planning. Arsenic poisoning symptoms: nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, diarrhea, with chronic low-dose exposure, weight loss, fatigue, darkening of the skin, white lines on fingernails called Mees lines, organ damage, kidneys, liver, eventually multi-organ failure that looked remarkably like advanced cancer. The more I read, the more I realized it was actually possible. Doctors would run standard cancer tests, blood work, imaging, biopsies. They'd find anomalies that suggested cancer, even if they couldn't identify the primary tumor. Happens all the time with certain cancers, pancreatic especially. By the time symptoms are severe, it's usually too late, and nobody tests for arsenic poisoning in a middle-aged woman with no obvious enemies and no access to industrial chemicals. I could get away with it. That thought should have terrified me. Instead, it excited me. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like I had power. Like there was a way out of this nightmare that didn't involve destroying my marriage or spending the rest of my life miserable. I spent 2 weeks researching where to buy arsenic. Turns out you can get arsenic trioxide from certain sources if you know where to look. Agricultural suppliers, some online retailers selling ant poison, that's essentially arsenic. How to dose it, enough to cause damage, but not so much it causes immediate acute poisoning. How to deliver it, mixed with food, especially acidic foods or drinks that might mask any slight metallic taste. I bought a small amount from an online supplier, shipped to my office under the guise of pest control research for my client. Tiny amount, maybe 4 ounces of white powder that looked like powdered sugar. Enough to kill someone if administered correctly over time. I kept it in my desk at work for a month. Didn't touch it, didn't bring it home. Just knowing it was there, knowing I had the option was enough. I told myself I'd never actually use it. I was just keeping my options open. Then Patricia had one of her episodes. Called me at work crying because David wasn't answering his phone and she was scared she was having a heart attack. I left an important meeting to rush home. Found her sitting on the couch, perfectly fine, watching TV. "Oh, I'm feeling better now," she said. "But since you're here, could you make me some tea?" I made her tea, and while I was making it, I thought about how easy it would be. How much better my life would be if she was just gone. How David would grieve, but eventually we'd have our house back, our marriage back, our life back. How none of this was going to get better while she was alive. How I'd already tried everything reasonable. How this wasn't my fault. She'd driven me to this. I brought the arsenic home that night. Started the next morning. Made Patricia her coffee like I did every morning. She insisted on having coffee ready when she woke up. Added about 50 milligrams of arsenic powder. It dissolved completely. No smell, no taste, no visible change. She drank it without comment. I felt sick with anxiety all day, kept expecting her to collapse or start vomiting or something dramatic. Nothing happened. She was completely normal. Had lunch, watched her shows, made dinner before I got home from work. I'd researched the dose carefully. 50 milligrams was enough to cause damage, but not acute poisoning. To kill someone with arsenic, you need to build it up in their system slowly. Let it accumulate in organs, cause chronic damage that eventually becomes irreversible. It takes time, months, sometimes over a year, but it works. I did it again the next morning, and the next, and the next. Every single morning for 2 weeks before I saw any effect. The first symptom was fatigue. Patricia started napping more, complaining she was tired all the time. David thought maybe she was fighting off a cold. I suggested she see a doctor. She went, got some blood work done. Everything came back mostly normal. Slightly elevated liver enzymes, but the doctor said that could be from medications she was taking. He told her to get more rest and come back if it got worse. I kept dosing her. Her coffee every morning. Sometimes I'd add it to food if I was cooking. Her portion would get a little extra seasoning she never noticed. I kept careful mental track of how much I was giving her, when, in what. I didn't write anything down because written records could be found, but I kept meticulous mental notes. 50 milligrams a day most days, sometimes 75 if she was particularly awful, never more than 100 because I didn't want acute poisoning. After a month, she started losing weight, complained food didn't taste right. David thought she was being picky. I acted concerned, suggested she see a nutritionist. She did. The nutritionist suggested eating smaller, more frequent meals. Patricia tried that. Kept losing weight anyway because her body was being slowly poisoned and couldn't properly metabolize nutrients anymore. 2 months in, she started having digestive problems. Nausea, diarrhea, stomach cramps. Went back to the doctor. He thought maybe she had developed irritable bowel syndrome or a food sensitivity. Ran more tests, found nothing conclusive, prescribed some medications for the symptoms. The medications didn't help because the problem wasn't IBS, it was arsenic, destroying her digestive tract. I felt guilty. Not guilty enough to stop, but guilty. I'd lie awake at night, listening to her in the bathroom, clearly in pain, and think about what I was doing. But then morning would come and she'd make some comment about how I'd loaded the dishwasher wrong or how David deserved a better wife, and I'd put the poison in her coffee without hesitation. 3 months in, David started getting really worried. His mother had lost 15 pounds and looked terrible. Gray skin, sunken eyes, clearly in pain even when she tried to hide it. I suggested a different doctor, maybe a specialist. He agreed. They went to a gastroenterologist who ordered a CT scan. The CT scan showed abnormalities in her liver and pancreas. Not definitive tumors, but areas of concern that warranted further investigation. The gastroenterologist referred her to an oncologist. I was terrified they'd figure it out, that the oncologist would run some test that would show arsenic in her system. But I'd researched this. Arsenic doesn't show up in standard blood work. You need to specifically test for it. And why would they? Middle-aged woman with organ abnormalities? They're looking for cancer, not poison. The oncologist did a biopsy, found cellular changes consistent with but not diagnostic of malignancy, ordered more tests. Tumor markers came back slightly elevated but not definitively positive for any specific cancer. The oncologist said it looked like possibly pancreatic cancer, possibly something else, but given her symptoms and the imaging, they should proceed as if it were cancer and start treatment. Patricia was devastated. David was devastated. I played the supportive daughter-in-law perfectly. Went to appointments, asked questions, took notes, researched treatment options, held Patricia's hand when she cried, all while continuing to poison her. She started chemotherapy, and here's the thing about chemotherapy, it makes you sick, really sick. Nausea, vomiting, fatigue, weight loss. So when Patricia got sicker instead of better, everyone assumed it was the chemo. The doctors assumed the cancer was progressing despite treatment. No one questioned why the treatment wasn't working, because I was still poisoning her. The chemo was making her sick, and the arsenic was making her sicker, and it all looked like aggressive cancer. 6 months after I started, Patricia could barely get out of bed. She'd lost 40 pounds. Her skin had taken on this grayish tone. Her fingernails had white lines across them, Mies lines, the telltale sign of arsenic poisoning. But the doctors didn't know to look for that. They saw a cancer patient deteriorating despite treatment and assumed the cancer was winning. I started to doubt myself, started to think maybe I should stop, let her recover, find some other way to get her out of my life. But I'd come this far. If I stopped now and she recovered, someone might figure it out, might question why she got better when treatment stopped, might run tests that would show arsenic. I was committed. The only way out was through. Patricia stopped treatment after 8 months. The doctors said it wasn't working and the side effects were destroying what little quality of life she had left. They recommended hospice, palliative care only. Keep her comfortable for the time she had left, which they estimated at 3 to 6 months. She lasted 5 more months. I kept dosing her, but in smaller amounts. Didn't want her to die too quickly and raise questions. Let the cancer run its natural course. Hospice nurses came to the house. They were wonderful, compassionate, made sure she wasn't in pain. They had no idea I was the one killing her. David was there every day, holding his mother's hand, telling her he loved her. She'd apologize for being such a burden. He'd tell her she could never be a burden. They'd cry together. And I'd sit there, watching this scene I'd orchestrated, feeling simultaneously guilty and relieved that it was almost over. Patricia died on a Tuesday morning. I'd given her a slightly larger dose the night before in her evening medication. She'd been declining for weeks, barely conscious most of the time. David had taken the day off work to be with her. I did too. We were both there when she took her last breath. David sobbed. The hospice nurse said it was a blessing she wasn't suffering anymore. I cried too, real tears, because despite everything, I was watching someone die that I killed, and that affected me even though I wanted it. The hospice nurse called the doctor. Death certificate was signed within hours. Cause of death, metastatic carcinoma. No autopsy, not needed for a hospice patient with a terminal diagnosis. Patricia was cremated 3 days later per her wishes. The funeral was beautiful. Lots of people came, said lovely things about Patricia, talked about what a good mother she was, how brave she'd been fighting her illness. David gave a eulogy about how his mom had taught him everything, how he'd never stop missing her. I stood next to him, held his hand, accepted condolences. Someone told me I'd been such a good daughter-in-law, caring for Patricia through her illness. I thanked them. We inherited her house, spent a month cleaning it out, going through her things, deciding what to keep and what to donate. Found photos of David as a kid, found letters she'd written but never sent, found a journal where she'd written about missing her husband, about feeling lonely but grateful to have David, and grateful that he'd married someone who took good care of her in her final months. That journal destroyed me, because Patricia hadn't been a monster. She'd been a lonely widow who interfered too much because she didn't know how else to feel needed. She'd been annoying and critical and difficult to live with, but she hadn't deserved to die. Especially not like that. Especially not by my hand. We sold her house for $300,000, used the money to remodel our kitchen, take a vacation to Italy, put the rest in savings. David was sad, but also relieved. He could grieve without the daily burden of watching his mother suffer. Our house was ours again. Our marriage improved. We started having sex again, going out again, laughing again. Everything I'd wanted when I started poisoning Patricia, I got. But I couldn't enjoy it, because every time David mentioned his mother, every time we used something bought with her house money, every time I walked past what used to be her bedroom, I was reminded of what I'd done. I'd killed someone, slowly, methodically, over 23 months. I'd watched her suffer and die and let everyone believe it was cancer. I'd comforted my husband while destroying his mother. I'd become exactly the kind of monster you read about and think, how could anyone do that? I started having nightmares. Patricia standing in my kitchen asking why her coffee tasted funny. Patricia at her funeral sitting up in her coffin to point at me and tell everyone what I'd done. Patricia's autopsy showing arsenic in her hair and bones and nails. All the places it accumulates that no one checked because no one had reason to. I couldn't tell anyone, couldn't go to therapy because therapists are mandated reporters for crimes, couldn't confess to David because he'd leave me and probably turn me in, couldn't tell a friend because how do you say I murdered my mother-in-law in casual conversation? So I'm telling you, random strangers who'll hear this confession and judge me and maybe report me or maybe not. I don't even care anymore. I just need someone to know the truth. Patricia Monroe died 2 years ago at age 61. Her death certificate says cancer, her tombstone says cancer, her obituary says cancer. But Patricia didn't have cancer. She had a daughter-in-law who wanted her dead and was patient enough to make it happen. She had me, and I killed her as surely as if I'd put a gun to her head and pulled the trigger. I got away with it, completely, perfectly, Totally got away with it. There's no evidence. The arsenic I bought was purchased under a fake business account that's long closed. The empty container was thrown away in a dumpster across town months before she died. There's nothing connecting me to her death except this confession, and even this is anonymous. But I haven't gotten away with it, because I carry it every day. I see Patricia in every reflection, every shadow, every quiet moment. I hear her voice asking why. I feel her presence in the house we bought with her death money. I can't escape her, even though she's gone. David talks sometimes about having kids, naming a daughter Patricia after his mother. I can't tell him that the thought of carrying a child named after someone I murdered makes me want to vomit. So I smile and nod and make excuses about not being ready yet. Maybe that's my punishment. Not prison, not legal consequences, but this, living with what I've done, pretending to be normal while knowing I'm a killer, letting my husband love me without knowing who I really am, having gotten exactly what I wanted and finding out it tastes like ash.
Patricia's death was ruled natural causes. No one suspects anything. No one ever will, unless I tell them. And I won't, because I'm a coward and a murderer, but I'm not suicidal. I'll carry this secret until I die. Then maybe I'll see Patricia again, wherever we go after death. And she'll get to ask me why. And I'll have to tell her the truth. Because you annoyed me. Because you made my life difficult. Because I wanted you gone, and I was willing to kill to make that happen. That's my confession. I poisoned my mother-in-law for nearly 2 years, and everyone thinks she died of cancer. I'm a murderer, and I'm getting away with it.